I chose my family over my passion. Now I wonder, did I choose wrong? The moment I signed that rejection letter, I wasn't just signing away a job, I was signing away my entire future for the stability of my family. I'm Ethan, 39, and my wife, Chloe, 38, had given me 2 beautiful children and a life I swore I wouldn't disrupt. The sacrifice was supposed to be the ultimate proof of love, but now, years later, I wake up every morning wondering if it was just the biggest mistake of my life. Before the suit and the soul-crushing deadlines for corporate clients, my life was music. It wasn't just a passion, it was a compulsion, the very language of my soul. I was a film composer, living and breathing in the world of cinematic soundscapes. I chased the perfect chord progression the way some people chase money. My studio, a small, soundproofed room in our house, was my sanctuary, filled with the complex, layered sound of the worlds I was creating. I could make a cello weep and a trumpet soar, telling a story without a single word. Then came the call that changed everything. The apex opportunity, A major, full-time staff composer position at a prestigious Hollywood studio, exactly the kind of job I had worked towards since I was a kid messing around with MIDI keyboards. It was the validation I craved, the chance to score major motion pictures, to finally stand among the artists I idolized. It meant stability, recognition, and the fulfillment of my absolute destiny. But it also meant uprooting our entire life. The job was in Los Angeles, 3,000 miles from our comfortable, settled home in the Midwest. Chloe had a successful career as a pediatric nurse practitioner, deeply embedded in the community. Our son, Leo, 7, and daughter, Mia, 5, were thriving in their schools, surrounded by Chloe's extensive network of family and friends. Her sister, Kate, 41, lived just 10 minutes away, providing crucial childcare and emotional support. The discussion that followed the offer was the most painful, drawn-out confrontation of my life, even though it lacked shouting. Chloe didn't issue an ultimatum, she just painted a picture of devastation. She spoke of the children struggling to adjust, losing their friends, leaving behind the only life they knew. She talked about her anxiety, her genuine fear of starting over, of losing the career momentum she had worked so hard for. She needed her family, her roots, her foundation. She looked at me one night, her eyes wide with fear, and said, "Ethan, I love your music, but I love our life more. If we go, we lose everything we've built, just for a chance. Can't you do that work here?" I knew the truth. I couldn't. Hollywood was about proximity, about late-night collaborative sessions, about being physically present in the creative chaos. My work here was always going to be secondary, remote, easily overlooked. But in that moment, seeing the genuine panic in her face, hearing the quiet plea for security, the choice felt obvious. My family needed me to be the rock, the anchor, the responsible one. I told myself that love was the highest art, and that being a dedicated father and husband was a greater score than any film could have. I convinced myself that true passion adapts. I called the studio, listened to the polite but undeniable disappointment in the hiring director's voice, and turned it down. The sound of that conversation ending was the most devastating silence I had ever experienced. I chose Chloe. I chose Leo and Mia. I chose stability. The immediate aftermath was intense, intoxicating relief for everyone but me. Chloe was ecstatic. She called me her hero, her rock, the most responsible and loving husband a woman could ask for. She celebrated my sacrifice, which only made the internal wound deeper. Her praise was a constant reminder of the monumental thing I had given up. The first year was difficult. I transitioned back to the commercial jingle market and corporate video scores, bland, innocuous background noise designed not to be noticed. I traded the complex textures of a symphony orchestra for cheap, preset synth sounds and generic, upbeat percussion. The work was steady, it paid the mortgage, but it felt like the Andy music. I was a master chef forced to make microwave dinners. My studio, once a sacred space, became a cage. I'd sit there for hours, staring at the screen, trying to summon the energy for another insurance company's theme song, feeling the creative part of my brain atrophy. The music I heard in my head, epic, sweeping, dynamic, was replaced by the dull, repetitive beat of an endless corporate cycle. I started to change subtly. I used to be energized, constantly talking about new musical ideas, eager to experiment. Now, I was lethargic. I'd come home exhausted, not from the effort of creation, but from the sheer, soul-crushing boredom of maintaining mediocrity. I stopped listening to new film scores. I couldn't bear the thought of hearing the brilliance that I was supposed to be creating. Chloe, meanwhile, was thriving. Her career was steady, her friendships strong, and her life was exactly the way she wanted it, predictable and secure. She was happy, genuinely happy, and that was the original goal. But her happiness became a mirror reflecting my own quiet misery. She stopped asking about my work altogether. If I mentioned a challenge with a new piece, she'd gently redirect. "Oh, honey, don't worry about it. It pays the bills, and that's what matters." She saw my work purely as a transactional necessity, a means to an end. The art, the passion, the identity, all of it became invisible to her. The resentment started to build like a slow, toxic leak. It wasn't directed at Chloe the person, but at Chloe the system of stability that demanded my complete creative self-immolation. I resented the quiet nights where she was content reading a book while I sat in the studio, drowning in the silence of my unused talent. I resented the ease with which she lived a full, self-actualized life while I navigated a hollow existence. I started trying to revive my original dreams in secret. I would stay up late, after Chloe was asleep, working on a personal composition, an orchestral piece, rich and complex, just for me. But I was so depleted from the day job that the music was always flat, lifeless. I'd listen back and realize the fire was gone, replaced by a technical competence devoid of soul. The man who signed the rejection letter had killed the artist. What would you do? Confront your wife and risk destabilizing the family for your own fulfillment, or continue to suffer in silence, knowing your misery is the price of their perfect life? I chose silence, thinking it was noble. I tried to be the perfect husband and father, throwing myself into school pickups, coaching Leo's soccer team, and handling all the household chores. I was good at it, great even. I became the family man, reliable, dependable, present. But every time one of the kids would draw a picture of me, I noticed the smile they drew was always a little too forced, a little too strained. I was present, but my spirit was miles away, probably in a sound booth in Burbank. The quiet, internal scream reached a fever pitch when I turned 37. I saw an announcement online. Marcus, 39, a composer I went to college with, the man who eventually took the Hollywood job I turned down, was nominated for a major industry award. Not just nominated, he was the frontrunner. He had scored 3 blockbuster films that year. I remember closing my eyes, feeling a physical wave of nausea. That should have been me. That award, that recognition, that life, it was mine to lose, and I did. I looked over at Chloe, who was excitedly planning a family trip to the lake house. She glanced up, saw my face, and just said, "Rough day, honey. Don't worry, the kids need that money for their college fund. It's worth it." Her words, meant to be supportive, were a profound dismissal of my agony. She saw the sacrifice as merely financial prudence, not a spiritual amputation. The betrayal wasn't malicious, it was pure, chilling oblivion. She genuinely could not fathom the scope of what I had given up. The final straw came a few months later. Chloe's sister, Kate, was visiting. They were in the kitchen, casually talking about their careers. I was in the living room, supposedly watching a sports game, but my ears were glued to their conversation. "It's amazing how reliable Ethan is," Kate said admiringly. "He's so grounded, never chasing those crazy creative ideas anymore. He's such a provider." Chloe laughed, a light, dismissive sound that cut me to the bone. "Oh, he went through that phase. The whole, starving artist in Hollywood, thing. It was exhausting. He'd spend all night in that studio with his silly little projects. Honestly, I think he realized he wasn't quite good enough for the big leagues, so he settled down. It was better for everyone. He realized he wasn't quite good enough. The world went silent, even the television. She hadn't just forgotten my dream, she had redefined my failure. She had convinced herself, and now her sister, that my decision was born not out of love for them, but out of personal inadequacy. My sacrifice was rewritten as a quiet concession to my own lack of talent. The man who once had the Hollywood job in his hand was now being defined as the guy who wasn't quite good enough. The lie was massive, but the real tragedy was that she believed it. She was safe in her reality, built on the premise that my dreams were childish and doomed to fail anyway. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly on the wooden floor. Both women jumped, startled. I walked out of the living room, heading straight to my studio. I closed the door, locked it, and sat down at the keyboard. I stared at the dusty MIDI controller and the cheap monitors. I was 38, professionally stagnant, emotionally hollow, and now dealing with the crushing knowledge that my wife saw me as a reliable mediocrity. I didn't cry or rage. I felt a cold, surgical clarity. The life I saved was hers. The man I lost was mine. I realized I couldn't live this lie anymore. The internal silence had to end. I needed to know if I could still create the music that once defined me. I started taking secret action. I used my savings, the money I had earned writing those mind-numbing jingles, to upgrade my studio equipment. I started working every single night, from 11 p.m. until 4 a.m. I wasn't working on commercial scores. I was working on my own, massive symphonic composition, a project that had been a fragment of an idea back when the Hollywood offer was on the table. It was a furious, desperate attempt to reclaim my voice. The music I produced was raw, angry, and undeniably brilliant. It was the sound of 7 years of resentment, regret, and lost potential poured into a digital canvas. I named the project simply, The Anchor. The change in me was noticeable. I was exhausted, yes, running on 3 hours of sleep, but I was also alive again. My eyes had a spark. I started humming melodies around the house. I was detached, moody, but filled with a purpose Chloe couldn't understand. She tried to connect. "You've been so quiet, Ethan," she observed one morning. "Are you getting enough rest? Maybe cut back on that freelance work." "I'm fine, Chloe," I said, a polite wall between us. "I'm working on something new." "Is it a nice corporate video?" she asked casually. "Maybe something for the school board." I just shook my head and walked away. She didn't need to know the truth. The truth was too dangerous. The composition took me 6 months. It was a full-length piece, a cinematic journey that told the story of a man who makes a sacrifice, only to be consumed by the silence of his choice. I hired a small, local ensemble of professional musicians, paying them out of pocket, and recorded the piece in a rented hall on a rainy Saturday. I told Chloe I was working late on a big contract. When the recording was done, I had the soundtrack of my lost soul. It was beautiful, tragic, and utterly mine. If you had created your greatest work, a work born from years of misery and sacrifice, would you keep it secret, or would you share it with the world, knowing the attention would shatter your stable life? I couldn't keep it a secret. I submitted the piece, under a pseudonym, to a respected international film scoring competition. I didn't tell Chloe. I didn't tell anyone. 3 weeks later, the email arrived. I won. The grand prize was a feature story in a major industry magazine, a cash award, and an introduction to 3 of the biggest film directors in Hollywood. The world I had walked away from 7 years ago was knocking on my door, not as an offer, but as a reward for the agony of my sacrifice. I had to tell Chloe. The confrontation was inevitable. I found her in the kitchen, calmly making dinner. I walked in, holding the printout of the winning announcement. I didn't speak the news, I simply laid the paper on the counter. She read it, then read it again. Her face shifted from casual interest to utter confusion, then to cold, white panic. She saw my name, my real name, not the pseudonym, and the title of the competition. She didn't ask about the music or the composition. She asked about the article, the attention, the possibility of moving. She asked about the stability. Ethan, what does this mean? She whispered, her voice laced with fear. Does this mean you'll have to travel? Does this mean we have to leave? What about Leo's middle school application? In that moment, I realized the full, crushing extent of our incompatibility. Her first, immediate thought was not pride, not joy, but destabilization. My success was a threat to her comfort. I told her everything. I told her about the Hollywood job I turned down for her. I told her about the soul-crushing jingles. I told her about hearing her call me, not good enough. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke with the calm finality of a man who has died and come back. She was devastated, but her devastation wasn't what I expected. She was truly, genuinely hurt that I had been miserable, but she was equally, genuinely confused as to why. She truly believed that financial security and stable family life was the ultimate goal, and that my yearning for artistic fulfillment was a selfish, unnecessary complication. She hadn't been malicious. She had just been blind, utterly convinced that her priorities were universal. The marriage didn't end in a bang. It ended in a long, drawn-out fade out. We are still together, living in the same house, but the relationship is a beautiful, fragile shell. I'm now juggling the high-pressure world of film scoring, taking small, exciting projects that require travel and immersion, and the duties of fatherhood. Chloe is trying to adjust, to accept the new, restless Ethan, who has finally reclaimed his voice. The stable life I chose is cracked, and the noise of my ambition is unsettling the peace I sacrificed everything for. But the silence is gone. I lost the comforting simplicity of a settled life, but I found the man I was supposed to be. Did I choose wrong 7 years ago? I don't know. Maybe the sacrifice was necessary to create the music that eventually set me free. I have my talent back, but the man who lives in this house is constantly on the verge of either glorious creation or devastating divorce. It's a terrifying, exhilarating life. What do you think? Was my sacrifice ultimately a necessity to ensure my kids had a stable foundation, or was it a fatal mistake that crippled my marriage beyond repair? Can a relationship survive when one partner's fulfillment is seen as a threat to the other's stability? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. If this story of sacrifice, resentment, and a long road back to self-discovery resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to follow the next movement of my life's score.